Annual Day of Commemoration, the UN urges every member state to honor the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust and millions of other victims of Nazism.
We are going to repeat that in German. Seit 1996 werden Überlebende des Nationalsozialismus Regime und führende Persönlichkeiten der Welt jedes Jahr am 27. Januar, dem Jahrestag der Befreiung von Auschwitz-Birkenau, eingeladen vor dem Deutschen Bundestag zu sprechen, um an den Holocaust zu denken. In 2005 hat die Generalversammlung der Vereinten Nationen diesen Tag zum Internationalen Holocaust-Gedenktag genannt.
Okay, I need this. An diesem jährlichen Gedenktag fordert die Vereinten Nationen allen Mitgliedstaaten auf, die 6 Millionen jüdischen Opfer des Holocaust und Millionen anderer Opfer des Nationalsozialismus zu ehren.
Let's have a moment of silence to bring to mind all the millions of men, women, and children who suffered and perished during the Holocaust.
I'm going to repeat that in German. Wir haben jetzt einige stille Gedenkminuten die Millionen von Männern, Frauen und Kindern, die während des Holocaust gelitten haben und umgekommen sind.
Now I'd like to introduce our librarian, Ms. Shizzle, who will introduce our very special guest.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ms. Shizzle, and I am your librarian. And today is a very special day. We have with us Estelle, Nadel. Now that Estelle is a very brave woman on lots of fronts. In addition to the story that she's going to share with you today, she also braved a pandemic and a snowstorm to get herself here to be with all of us. Let's please give a very warm Broomfield welcome to Estelle, please.
I'm glad everybody came to school today, even though it's bad weather. I was born in Poland in a small village by the name of Borek. Borek was a very small village. My family had a lot of land, but we had very little money. We were very poor. My parents planted vegetables. And my mother would go on Mondays and take some of the vegetables to the market in Krasnow. And primarily that's how we had a little bit of money. We never lacked food, but we were very poor. I was the youngest of 5 children. I had a sister who was the oldest, and I have 3 brothers in between. My family, my uncle lived next door to us with his sons and his wife. Next door to him lived my mom's sister with her husband and my cousin. My family always got together, and we were happy even though we were poor. In 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, things really became bad for the Jews. At first, my dad would have meetings in our home, and my mom's cousins would come, and they would talk about what was happening. I was 7 years old at the time. I was 7 years old in 1942, but this was 1939. At first, my dad and the cousins thought that things would be good. The economy was going to pick up and things would be better for everyone. But as time went on, things really became very bad. There were people disappearing. A lot of my mom's cousins left for Russia because they were afraid that they were going to be taken away. My dad was very religious. He prayed to God 3 times a day. He always thought that nothing would happen to our family because he was so religious. By 1942, my dad was forced to go to work at the refinery. There was a refinery in our village. And my sister was made to go to work there. My oldest of the 3 brothers was made to go to work at the airport in Krasna. So every morning, early in the morning, they went to work. One day, the Gestapo came to our home, ransacked our house. They made a mess out of it. They were looking for weapons. We had no weapons. They were looking for valuable things. We had no valuable things. For me as a child, 7 years old, I was very frightened. 2 weeks later, my sister came running back from work. It was still very early in the morning. I was still asleep. She told my mom to get out of the house because when she got to the refinery was surrounded by the Gestapo, and she thought something terrible might be happening. My mom begged her to go with us. Don't go back. She said, I'll be fine. I know a lot of the Germans and nothing will happen to me. She went back to work. My mom sent one of my brothers to tell my aunt, who was just recuperating from breast cancer surgery, and told her to go into the fields for the day, take some food. And my cousin, my uncle also worked at the refinery. My mom took some food, and the 3 of us and my mom and my aunt and my cousin went into the fields. My brothers, 2 brothers, one was 15, the other one was 14, and I was 7. We stayed in the fields all day long. During the time that we were in the fields, what happened at the refinery was the Germans decided that there were too many Jews working there. So they made 2 lines. They said, you go to the right, you go to the left. My dad wound up in the right line. My sister and my uncle wound up in the left line. When my sister saw where my dad was, she ran to be with him. That day, any Jew that was found in their home or on the right line, my brother was caught going to work at the airport also. They were taken by train. We had always thought that they were taken into the fields and that they were shot. But I found out when I went to Auschwitz 5 years ago that my brother, my sister, my dad, and all the Jews that were caught that day were taken to Auschwitz. By 1942, the final solution had been put in place, and it said not to take any Jews to the concentration camp. Just kill them. That day, they were documented and they were taken right into the gas chambers. Of course, we didn't know when we were in the fields what had happened at the refinery. So nighttime came. My mom told one of my brothers to go home to see if it was safe to go home. My brother came running back and he said, "It's not safe. No one has returned. We cannot go home. Our house had been ransacked. Things were taken out of it." So my mom told my aunt to go take her daughter and go to this family, the Korowskis, their name was, see if they would hide her. My mom was a very fantastic cook and baker, and she was very well known in the village. Whenever there was a christening or a wedding, she was always asked to bake and cook. So people really liked her. So my mom took the three of us and we went to this man's home. He had a little tiny house and he lived all alone. And she asked him if he would hide us. He said, "You could stay tonight, but you'll have to leave tomorrow night because if the Gestapo finds out that I'm hiding Jews, I too will be killed." So we stayed the night. The following night, my mom went to this very good friend. Her name was Kudlina. She was a very elderly lady. She had a one-bedroom little house, and she had an attic. She was a very good friend to my mom. She was a very good help to my mom many times, and she would come and help my mom bake and cook. So my mom knew her well. She said, my mom asked her if we can hide in her attic, and she said yes. So my mom came and got us, and we went into Kudlina's attic. We stayed in the attic during the day. At night, 3 times a week, my mom would have to go out for food. She would go to different Gentile homes and ask for food, people that she could trust. One night, my mom went out. 3 young, 19-year-old young men saw her. They recognized who she was. And when she was coming back to us, the Gestapo was waiting for her. And they took her to the Jedlice jail. When our mom did not come back, we knew something terrible had happened. So the 3 of us went to where my aunt and my uncle at this point had joined her, and my cousin, and we thought maybe the Korowskis could find out what happened to our mother. The following day, the Korowskis found out that there was a certain German that would come in the morning, and whenever they caught any Jews at night, he would be the designated shooter. And so our mother was shot that morning. The following night, the 3 of us went back to Kudlina's. We stayed in the attic during the day, all day long. We had peepholes in the attic. The roof of the attic was made out of thatch. And so that's how primarily we entertained ourselves day in and day out. At night, Kudlina would have us come downstairs and she would make the house dark so she could open the windows so we could breathe the fresh air. My younger brother was very fair, and he decided he didn't want to stay with us any longer. He decided that he would go into the next village and find a job on a farm. We really wanted him to stay with us, but he decided he could not stay with us any longer. So he left us. We were in the attic. One day, the children from next door came and ransacked Budlina's garden. We watched through our peepholes and saw them take the fruit off her trees. That was her food. She had a lovely, lovely garden. They made a mess out of it, and we saw it. When Budlina came home that night, she was crying, "Who could do this to me?" We were not going to tell her because we worried that she gets too excited. But as she kept crying all evening long, we blurted it out and told her that it was the kids from next door. She ran out of the house. She went to the neighbor and she said to the neighbor, "How dare your children made a mess out of my garden? That was my food." The woman said to her, "If you don't be quiet, I'm going to report you to the Gestapo that you're hiding Jews." When she came back and told us that, we knew we needed to leave. We could not stay there any longer. So she really did not want us to go. She wanted us to stay there. She was like a mother to us, but we knew we could not stay. So we decided we would go away for 2 weeks, and during the time that we were gone, Budlina would have the neighbors over. She would invite them over for tea. And she would make an excuse to open the trap to the attic. As you walked into her little tiny house, there was a ladder that went up to the attic. And as you opened the trap, you could see right in there. So we went away for 2 weeks, and my brother went back on a Sunday night to see if she had the neighbors over. She said yes. She said she had the neighbors over, and she made an excuse that she needed her knitting, and she opened the trap, and they could see right in there, there's nobody there. "I want you to come back." My brother came back that night, and the following night, on a Monday night, we returned to Budlina's. Friday, we hear a roar outside. My brother jumped up, looked through the peephole. He says, "There are 5 motorcycles coming down the road." He said, "They're coming for us." We didn't know what to do. We couldn't run outside because it was daylight. And the neighbors would see us running, and they would point to us. So we ran downstairs and we hid under Budlina's bed. Sure enough, they came and tore down her door, and one of the first places they looked was under the bed. They pulled us out into the courtyard, and they kept beating my brother with a club on the shoulder because they were told that there were more Jews than just the 2 of us. And I kept crying to the Gestapo not to hurt my brother. And he kept beating him, and I kept saying, "There's nobody there, just the 2 of us." After a time, they took us on the motorcycles to the Jedlice jail. We arrived at the jail. The man that was in charge of the jail was Polish. He was not German. And they kept questioning us. You need to tell us where the other Jews are. And they kept asking and asking, and I kept crying so much. I knew what was going to happen to us in the morning. The man that was head of the jail even took me on his lap to console me. I was 7.5 years old at the time. After a while, the head of the jail, the man that was head of the jail, said to the Gestapo, take those two down into the basement cell. The Gestapo said, but there's somebody else in that cell. He says, take that person out and put those two in that cell. We waited a while, and finally the Gestapo came up, took us down into the basement cell. It was a very small cell. He locked us up. There was a wood bed against the wall, and one side of the bed was higher than the other. Straight ahead was a window. It had bars on the window, but it had no glass. And at this point, it was dark, and it was very cold. So the two of us laid down on the wood bed, and we cuddled together to keep warm. We were so cold. There were no covers or anything. So we cuddled together and laid there. And we knew what our fate was going to be the following morning. After a time, my brother got restless and he stood up. And I kept saying to him, please come and cuddle me. I'm so cold. He says, I want to see what's outside that window. And I am saying to him, please don't make any noise. At least we have tonight. Come and cuddle me. He says, help me get the wood bed in front of the window. And I said, no, I was so frightened. He says, don't be a little baby. Help me get the wood bed in front of the window. So I helped him get the wood bed in front of the window. And he stood up on it and he looked outside. And he said that the window was level with the sidewalk. He says to me, it's very dark out there. He said, it's very dark out there. He says, I'm going to try to squeeze through those bars. And I am hysterical. Don't leave me. He tries to get out and he's stuck. He can't get in and he can't get out, and I'm pulling on him. Finally, we get him back in. He says to me, listen to me very carefully. If I get out, you won't have any trouble because you're so little. He says, you're going to have to pull yourself up to the bars. You're going to have to watch very carefully. There is a guard that comes around every so often. And you have to make sure that the guard turns the corner before you go. He says, you're going to have to cross the street. You're going to have to climb over a fence, and I'll meet you on the other side of the fence. And I am hysterical, so frightened. He tries to get out and he gets out. I pull myself up to the bars and I'm watching very carefully to see where the guard is. Sure enough, the guard goes around the building. I get through, no problem. I run across the street. I get to the other side of the fence, tear myself up. It's very, very dark night, and I'm in someone's garden. I'm looking for my brother. His name was Shia. And I walked in the garden, calling his name in a whisper, Shia, where are you? There was no answer. I walked further in the garden. Shia, where are you? No answer. Pretty soon, I am so frightened. I don't know my way. I don't know what to do. I start to cry really, really loud. A woman comes out of the house and she says, "Who do I hear crying?" I walked towards her and I said, "Me." She says, "Who are you?" I told her that I was Jewish and I just escaped from the jail across the street. "Can you please hide me?" She said, "I can't hide you because my husband is one of the jailers across the street. And when he works the night shift, and when he returns, he will take you right back and they'll shoot you." I said, "Can you think of anyone that can hide me?" She said, "Come into the house." I came into the house and there was another couple sitting at a table and they were having drinks. She told me to sit down on the chair and I sat there. She went over to her friends and they were whispering something, but I could not hear what they were saying. And I sat in that chair and I thought, what am I going to do? I don't know my way. And a thought came into my mind. My mother would take me to the public showers on Friday. Our home was very primitive. We didn't have showers. So she would take me every week to these public showers. And I thought maybe the lady knew where that was. And from there, I knew how to find my aunt and uncle and my cousin where they were hiding. So I said to the lady, "Excuse me, do you know where the public showers are in Warwick?" She says, "Yes." "Can you take me there, please?" She says, "I'll think about it." I sat there for a time, and after a while she said, "Okay, I'll take you there." She took me through the fields, not through the main roads, and we got to the public showers. As I said, it was a very, very dark night. I waited a long time before I went to where my aunt and uncle were hiding because I was worried that she would see where I was going and then everyone would be in danger. So after a time, I went to where my aunt and uncle were hiding. They were hiding in an attic over a stable. And I started to walk up the ladder. And Mrs. Karofsky, the lady that was hiding my aunt and uncle, heard me rustling around and she came out and she said, "Enya, what are you doing here?" And I told her what had happened, that my brother and I got caught and that we were taken to the jail and we were able to escape. And I told her that I couldn't find my brother and that this lady took me to the public showers. She also was worried that the lady saw where I was going, and I kept assuring her no one saw where I was going. She took me upstairs to the attic. My aunt and uncle were upset with me that I came there. Now everyone would be in danger. I kept crying to them that no one saw where I was going. By dawn, my brother came and we reunited. We hid in that attic for 2 more years. My brother would go out for food 2-3 times a week during the night to get food for all of us. And I worried every time he went out that he would be caught like our mother was. We were not able to stand up in that attic. The attic floor was very weak. I stood up once and I was very small and I fell into the stable. The floor was made out of wood, but it was very weak. So we could only sit, lay, or crawl. We had peepholes, and my cousin and I, we would always look outside to see what was happening. And we primarily entertained ourselves day in and day out in that attic that way. We were liberated by the Russian army. My brother was able to walk because he would go out for food, but we were not able to walk. My aunt at this point was ill. Her cancer had spread, and we were taken to our home. We were carried there, and little by little, I was able to get my legs built up, so I was able to walk. The Russians moved in with us, and they were very good to us. They fed us, they took care of us. But after a time, they had to leave. So when they left us, again, we were in danger. The Jews were all in danger because the young Polish young men would come to the Jewish homes, whoever survived, and they would pull them out during the night and shoot them. So we knew we needed to leave Poland. We could not stay. Meanwhile, my uncle had 4 sisters. One sister lived in Australia. 2 of the sisters were killed in the Holocaust. One survived, so she came to live with my aunt and uncle and my cousin. My aunt was getting weaker and weaker. My younger brother came and we reunited with my younger brother. We needed to get false papers to leave Poland. In order to get false papers, you had to pay off people. My uncle went and got papers for them. My brother got papers for the 3 of us. Meanwhile, my aunt died of the cancer, and we had to bury her. We left Poland, left all our property to the Karowskis, and we went to Czechoslovakia and then to Hungary. And in Hungary, my uncle, my cousin, and his sister left us during the night. They did not tell us that they were going to leave us. He left us because he knew that his sister was going to send papers for them, but not for us. So he went to Italy. That was the last time that I saw my uncle. We stayed in Hungary, the 3 of us, and things began to deteriorate on the Russian side. So we needed to get over to the American side. In order to get over to the American side, we had to be smuggled across the border. My brother earned some money and paid off a guard to take us during the night across the border. We wound up in Ranshofen, Austria, in a DP camp there. And from there, we were going to go to Israel. We stayed in that DP deportation camp. And during the time we were there were a lot of talented people that would put on plays. And I had a very pretty voice, and I was very little for my age. So every time there was a play or a performance, I would be asked to sing a solo. One night, a woman soldier came over to me, and she asked me, she wanted to meet my parents. I told her I had no parents. She asked me who we live with. I said, I live with two brothers. She says, how would you like to go to America? And I looked at her and I said, I don't know. I didn't know there was an America. I had no education up to this point. I knew she was an American and this was the American side, but I didn't know there was an America. Unbeknownst to me, my brother wanted to go to the United States. He tried, but there was no one to sponsor us. So I told her that I would have to ask my brother. I went home that night and I told my brother that I met this American soldier and she wanted to know if we want to go to America. He says, yes, we want to go to America. And that's how the process started for us to go to the United States. In order to go to the United States, you had to be in perfect health. You had to take x-rays, you had to take shots, vaccinations, and every week in the town square, there was a list that would come out with who was going to the United States next. My brother would check every single week, and one week he goes to check, and sure enough, his name is on there. My other brother's name is on there, but not mine. He goes to find out why my name is not on the list. They told him that my x-ray came back with a spot on the lungs and that I could not go on that ship, but they will retake the x-ray. So we made our younger brother go to the United States, just in case there was a problem with my health. At least he was there to help. He really didn't want to leave us, but he decided that that would be the best thing. My brother did not trust me to go to get the x-ray. He sent somebody else in my place. But the truth was, someone took my good x-ray out of my folder and put it in a person's folder that really had a spot on the lungs and put that person's x-ray in my folder. So everything got straightened out. And 2 weeks later, we were scheduled to leave. We left on the ship. Our ship broke down on the English Channel, and the United States had to send another ship for us. We arrived in the United States April 1st, 1947. My younger brother came, and he was already an American. He came to meet us at the ship, and he already had a job in New Jersey. And my older brother and I were placed in a hotel in Manhattan. During the time we stayed there, they were looking for a job for my brother. My brother decided that I would be better off to go into a foster home because they could not take care of me. They found a job for my older brother, also in New Jersey. And I stayed in the hotel, waited to be placed in a foster home. During the time that I was at that hotel, the manager would give me money every single day to go to the movies. They didn't know what to do with me. I was 12 and a half years old. So I went to the movies every day and I watched the same movie over and over again. I didn't know how to speak English. I only knew one word was headache because when I was on the ship, I would get headaches and I would go to the nurse and point to my head. And she taught me the word headache. But as I watched all those movies, I learned how to speak English. By the time I went to the foster home, I spoke English somewhat. Didn't know how to read or write, but I spoke a little bit of English. I went to a foster home in the Bronx. In September, I started school. They put me in the 6th grade. And it was very difficult for me because I didn't know how to read or write. And in those days, there were no teachers that would stop and help you out. So I struggled, really struggled. My brothers had heard that there was this couple that lived in Long Island. They had a son in the Air Force, and he was a pilot in the Second World War, and his plane was shot down, and that was their only son. They decided they wanted to adopt an older child. So my brothers made me go live with them in Long Island. I lived there till 1951. And in 1951, they decided that they wanted to sell their house and move to California because when her son was stationed in California, she would go visit him and she loved the weather. So they sold their house. The day we moved out of the house, her husband died of a heart attack. So it was just the two of us that went to California. And I lived most of my life in California. I have 3 sons. I have 5 grandchildren. And I moved to Colorado 18 years ago. And so you have me up to date.
I think. Does anyone have a question that you would like to ask Estelle? You can think for a moment. I do, but I'll wait for you. My question would be is if there was one message that you could leave these teenagers with, what is that one message?
Hope. Never give up hope. There's always something good will happen. And you should never, ever say, I can't take it any longer. You need to always look at the positive things.
Any other questions? In the back.
Do you know what happened to your uncle? I guess he made it or if he was caught?
And my cousin and his sister, they got papers to go to Australia. And they lived he lived in Australia. I never saw my uncle, but my cousin, I did see her. She would come to the United States. And 1992, my cousin, my 2 brothers, and myself, one of my nephews, and my cousin's son, we went back to Poland, all of us together. We went to Poland because Mrs. Kurowski had a daughter. Her name was Milcha, and she lived with her mom and dad. And she was very instrumental in hiding us. She came every night to take the waste down from the attic. And at this point, she was married when she lived with her parents, but her husband worked in Germany somewhere. So she was fabulous to us. And she had 2 sons, and one of her sons is a professor at the University of Krakow. And he came to the United States on sabbaticals every so often. And he urged us to go back to see his mom. His mom was aging. And of course, the Kurowskis had been dead for quite a few years. And so that's why we went back to see his mom.
I think there's another question.
Are you still in contact with your brothers?
I was in contact with my brothers always. when things became better, we were able to go and see each other. My two brothers have died at this point. My older brother died already about 17 years ago, and my younger brother just died about 4 years ago. They were just a year apart. Yes.
My great-grandfather was a commander in Joseph Stalin's army, and he was a big backer of the Soviet communist regime. If he was here today, what would you say to him?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Have you met any other Holocaust survivors since coming to America?
Yes, I have. There are a lot of Holocaust survivors in California, and there's some here in Colorado. Not too many, as we're dying off. But I keep in touch with some of them, and I go on the March of the Living. That's how of course, in 1992, we went to Auschwitz with my brothers and my cousin, and we went to find out if there were any records of any family that were killed in Auschwitz, but at that time, they didn't have these records. But I go on the March of the Living with a group from Los Angeles every year on the Remembrance Day of Yom HaShoah, not this Remembrance Day, but in April there's a Remembrance Day. It's called Yom HaShoah. And on that day, they have about 16,000 high school seniors from all over the world that march from Auschwitz to Birkenau. And so I'm one of the survivors that the group takes. I'm one of 6 survivors that the group takes. And we go to Auschwitz, to Poland, and then we go to Israel. And that's how I found out. The day before the march, we were taken through Auschwitz by a guide. And the guide happened to take us into this one barrack that had these huge scrolls. And the scrolls have the 6 million Jews that were killed. So I decided to look to see if any of my family was killed. And that's where I found my dad, my sister, and my brother, that they were in Auschwitz. The year they were born, what town they were born, and where they died. So, any other questions? Yes.
But when you went back to your village in '92, was it super different?
It was, of course, all our property, we gave up all the property to the Karaskis, and they modernized our little village. The anti-Semitism was still there. When my two brothers and I were leaving, and my cousin were leaving, and my nephew were leaving to go back to the United States, we had to take a cab in Warsaw to the airport. And the taxi driver said to the other taxi driver, he said, those are those dirty Jews. And my brother spoke Polish very well. I lost the language completely, but they they knew how to speak Polish. Yeah, so it was still there, and it is still there today.
In the back.
How have you coped with all the events and all the things that have happened to you, if you're willing to share?
Like,
How do you cope with everything?
life has a way of you want to live. And, I was pretty lucky. I survived, although I never healed properly to accept the death of my family. But I know that I have to live. When I came to the United States, I wanted to be an American. I did not want to be identified as a Holocaust survivor. When my children were born and they became adults, they never heard my story because I could not talk about it. I didn't want to talk about it. I worked on my accent, not to have a European accent, because I wanted to be just like the other kids, like you guys. And so, but as time went on, I needed to face it, and I started speaking when I was in my 40s.
We're glad that you have.
Thank you.
Please, let's thank Estelle. So we will remember Estelle because of you.
Well, it's because of you kids that you're the next generation. And someday, when you have your own children, and you could tell them that there was a Holocaust, you met a Holocaust survivor. This is my message to you, is to pass it down from generation to generation.
Thank you.